Hi, my name is Leah Day, and welcome to this video on the Free Motion Quilting Project. Today I want to discuss another design, a design actually created by Karen McTavish. It's called McTavishing, and it was the second design I ever learned. I knew how to stipple, was bored with it, and then went searching on the internet, found Karen McTavish and her beautiful design. And this design was really the one that kind of changed my focus on free motion quilting. It made me see that there was a lot more textures out there and possible to stitch and thread, and that really the possibilities were limitless. And so I want to use this design in the rays coming out from the earth. I really love sun symbols, and I kind of incorporate them in almost all of my quilts because my name is Leah Day, and when I married my husband, Day became my last name, and that became kind of my symbol, kind of my thing. Always sunshines, always rays of light, that kind of thing. And so I love to incorporate these in my quilts and play with different designs over them. And there's a lot of different ways of doing this. I mean, of course, there are 22 rays on this quilt, and you could just do two different designs alternating back and forth. So, you know, McTavishing in one area, stippling in another, back and forth through the whole section. You can break it up. That's pretty much the only way to break it up really evenly. And in this quilt, I'm going to try breaking up kind of in a unique way. Stitching McTavishing in certain sections and some other branching designs, similar kind of variations of McTavishing in other sections. It's not going to work out completely evenly, but it is going to look really cool. And I hope that this helps you see just how many ways there are to quilt through this area. And just for the record, almost any design will work in these spaces. There are some tight, weird areas, so you want to just watch those line-based designs that kind of form lines back and forth. Those might be a little tricky to hop, skip, and jump around these kind of complex, kind of wiggly flame areas. That's the only thing. Whenever I'm looking at a design and fitting and filling it into an area, the only thing I look at is it going to be tricky to get into all of those spaces? That's the only question I ask myself. But pretty much anything is possible. Anything goes. So let me show you how to McTavish in this video, and I'm going to fill in kind of the bottom dark blue ray right there. I'm working on the black whole cloth version of this quilt. But I'm going to quilt through this area with McTavishing so you see how that works. And you know, this could work pretty much anywhere in the quilt. It could also work in her hair and be really beautiful, or her body. So definitely keep that in mind. You don't have to put it in the background unless you really want to. So let's get started. I'm going to drop my needle down right here. And you see how I kind of put labels on different areas of the quilt. Whenever I'm looking at it and planning out what textures and fillers I want to use, sometimes I'll take a marking pencil and mark a symbol or a name right there on the quilt, so that way I remember which one I'm stitching as I reach that area, and that's a really nice time saver. Okay, so to stitch McTavishing, this is kind of my style of McTavishing. You're going to quilt out with a nice wiggly line. Make that as long and wiggly as you want, and then you're going to kind of form a point as you stitch back, and you're going to hit that starting edge. Okay, so I just hit the starting edge. I've not gone all the way back to, let me lift my foot, I've not gone back to that actual starting point, I've gone to the starting edge. So I am an equidistance away from that starting line. That's kind of an important step difference about branching designs versus pivoting designs. They always hit the starting edge, not the starting point. So now travel stitch, come all the way back up and hit that point that you formed. Hit it and then bounce back. And again, I'm an equidistance away from the previous line. Travel stitch again and come up again. So now you've formed pretty much, I'm going to come back one more time, even though it's not really required. See how you pretty much formed a nice lock of wavy hair. And that's another kind of name for this design. A lot of people call it wavy hair or cartoon hair, that kind of thing. Either way it works. You know, I consider this McTavishing. That's where I learned it from Karen's book, Mastering the Art of McTavishing. So now we're going to branch out with another design. another shape. And whenever you have to work in weird areas, you just kind of have to make it up and make it fit. Sometimes that might mean just running parallel lines, nice wiggly lines through the space. Whatever works, really. I love the forgiving nature of McTavishing. I really do. And I also love how it combines echoing and travel stitching together in such a nice, seamless way. This is how I learned how to echo, and this is how I learned how to travel stitch. And trust me, my first quilts with McTavishing were not perfect, not by a long shot. The first time I was doing those echoes, I couldn't control my line. It was going, in and out and all wiggly wobbly against the side of the starting line. And that's okay. The more you stitch it, the better you'll get at it. And trust me, 3 or 4 quilts in, I have McTavishing in the bag. And I was like, okay, what's next? So it's a fun texture to really gain some good skills with. So now I'm going to wiggle up and kind of cross that. I like to make the texture as flowing and fluid as possible. I don't like it to look like it's all coming from one direction. I want it to look like, well, like the wind blows, like wind blowing through your hair. I just really want it to be nice and open. Now, because I'm hop, skipping, and jumping around this, makes it a little bit more complex. I'm just butting up against that piece and then finishing it off on this side. And that kind of thing is no big deal when you're fitting and filling around the space. You just want to just be careful to travel stitch accurately. Okay, so that looks pretty darn good. Now I'm going to come up and just kind of form some back and forth shapes here. And then branch up with another one. Those weird areas are going to happen, and you just have to figure out the best way of dealing with them. I like, just some simple curvy lines. I could have just continued this one and filled it up completely. That might have looked even better. It's really hard to say. Now, if your travel stitching doesn't completely connect, so like right here, my travel stitching didn't completely connect with that line before it, here's a trick that I like to do. And everybody has a different opinion. A lot of people, when I show this in a class or something, they're like, oh, well, that's going to build up the thread too much. I don't think so. So I just went back over it and stitched over that area 2 times. I built up the thread so that it looked like just a lot of very dense travel stitching. So, there's a lot of ways of getting out of a mistake or hiding a mistake. In that situation, I just kind of thread painted over, built up the thread so thick it covered it up. And that worked pretty well. There's no wrong way to do it. I could have left it. No one's going to look at the quilt and go, wow, your McTavishing is not perfect. It still looks good. And there's probably another texture you could create with having those travel stitch areas just not connect fully. That would be something cool to kind of try and play with and see what texture comes out of that. So I'm just building this up as I go, and I need to wiggle back here because I missed this section back here. You cannot stitch yourself into a corner with this design. And you can't because there's always a surface, a line that you can travel stitch against. And you see, I do a lot of extra travel stitching. I really like to build up texture with this. It doesn't scare me at all. This is technically an art quilt, or you could consider it a show quilt. So thread texture is a good thing. It's going to go on a wall. It's not going to go on the bed. So it doesn't hurt for your stitching to be dense, and it doesn't hurt for it to have multiple layers built up on top of one another. You can see I'm just coming into this weird area, and I'm just going to continue this repetitive pass back and forth, and then fill up this way. Now if you wanted to, you could switch directions, kind of do that, and that would be fine too. There's really no rule, and there's no wrong way to do it. You can mess it up completely, like right there I kind of really made a mess of that, and that's okay. Just get in the area and get back out again. Don't obsess about it. And come And I will say, stitching on a scale, a smaller scale like this, will give you a lot more practice and bang for your buck than it would if you stitch on a bigger scale, simply because you're filling and creating that dense design over a lot more space on the surface of the quilt. So I would advise stitching small if you're wanting to learn how to quilt on a domestic sewing machine. Once you learn how to stitch small, all you have to do is expand it. So that is how to quilt McTavishing. I really hope that you've enjoyed learning how to quilt this beautiful flowing design. This design will work anywhere in this quilt. Her hair, her body, this is one of the sun, kind of the rays coming out in the background area. Any of those spaces would work perfectly fine and be a great choice. So definitely play with it, experiment, and have some fun stitching McTavishing. And remember that you can find more instruction on this particular design in Karen McTavish's book, Mastering the Art of McTavishing. It's a wonderful book, and she includes a CD in it with some really good footage on her McTavishing and I think some other really cool techniques. So definitely check that out. So my name is Leah Day, and this has been a video for the Free Motion Quilting Project, stitching it out on Express Your Love, this goddess quilt we're working through in 2013. I really hope you'll check out more videos on creating this quilt, and that can be found at freemotionproject.com. Until next time, let's go quilt.